Hello, it's Bob Wells here, and welcome to the Undercurrent Stories podcast, where we dive deep into the hidden depths of the world, one fascinating guest at a time. Every life has its turning points, those moments when everything changes, when one chapter closes and another begins. For my guest today, that journey became the heart of a remarkable memoir. Carolyn Flynn is a journalist, author and book coach whose book, Boundless, takes us into the lived experience of transformation, the challenge of letting go, the uncertainty of reinvention, and extraordinary freedom that can come from stepping into the unknown. It's a story rooted in one life, but it asks questions that touch us all about identity, courage, and what it means to begin again. And today we're going to explore that journey and the craft of turning life into story. Hello, Carolyn, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I look forward to diving in. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. And I guess before we sort of talk a bit more about the book and memoir writing, perhaps if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your life growing up, and sort of how you became a journalist and author.
I can answer that with one word: curiosity. I was known at the family dinner table for being the person who asked all the questions, particularly the loaded questions. And I don't mean loaded bad, but like rich and, have a lot of depth and would lead people to a lot of places. So I think I very quickly had a sense of story in terms of just formative moments, decisive moments, what creates the twists and turns of our life. I probably had that sense because I have Irish and Scottish heritage. And so yes. I would say that my father was the quintessential Irish storyteller.
Yes, they do have that reputation, don't they?
Yes, they do.
And that's sort of what you got into telling stories.
Oh, I came home one day when I was 8 years old, and I was just lit up because my teacher, it was near Halloween, and we had walked into the classroom, and she had these orange footprints, neon orange, going up the wall. And then she said, "How did these get here? You need to write the story."
Oh, wow.
Of course, it was a haunted house with a ghost that had neon orange footprints. That was the only way you could see the ghost. I took that and I ran with it. And I came home and I told my father, I want to be a writer. And he gave me a Brother typewriter and a collection of Hemingway short stories and said, "Go, do it. It's all yours. There's nothing to stop you." And those were really the two best things he could have given me. They're very emblematic, I think, now when I look back. One is the instrument by which you can do your work. The other was he was teaching me what I still talk about now as a book coach for the Story Catalyst is read like a writer. Start there. And that just put me on a journey of finding all the other writers who were writing things that I could write about that. Louisa May Alcott was probably more of an influence than Hemingway in terms of carving out subject matter, but it did point the way for me.
That's the second time in the last week I've heard somebody mention Hemingway as a writer. I must admit, I haven't really read much of him at all. What's so unique about Hemingway?
I think I think he also, we forget this, but I think he was breaking into territory that hadn't really been written about before at the early 20th century. He was going into forbidden territory. He writes about an abortion. But he writes about it in this minimalist way that also is, showing how we hold those emotions, particularly in the, traditional male personality, how we hold those emotions back. And so, what people say about his writing is that it's the iceberg effect. You see the tip of the iceberg, but the whole iceberg is there. And I think that is what makes his craft so powerful, and it was impactful because it was a different approach. Ultimately, he's not my writer. He's not my spirit animal writer, because he was writing about different things and breaking up a different territory. But he was a good place to start because I really do believe in the compression of language by compressing it and getting it sort of to its smallest nugget, you can add so much more meaning to it. And it creates this portal, I think, for the reader to bring in their own experience with it. They fill in the rest of that iceberg, but they're feeling it with you. So I actually was looking last night at, I have a short story collection that just recently won a semifinalist award. And that might be the next thing that comes out. It's called Broken Chords. And I was looking at it and submitting it to a couple of other publishers now. And I was going, this was my minimalist phase. And the minimalism is so good.
And by that, what you're referring to earlier on, do you mean that the sort of secret of good writing is, as far as the reader is concerned, is for the author to distill down his or her thoughts into something that is very, very easily understandable? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I like your word distill, because I think that really is, you're kind of, when you think about what that word really means, you're getting down to sort of the essence of the purity of the liquid, the potency of the liquid. And what I often find, I mean, I have to do this myself when I edit myself and I revise myself, but I also do it as a book coach. And I say, I know what you're trying to say here, because you're saying all of it, it's diluting what you're really trying to say. And I think it's that exercise between dilution and distillation. And when you get to distillation, you're clear. People, the effect is clear. I often say the writing is very simple. It's theme plus technique produces effect.
Yes.
And if you know your theme and your technique is distillation, then you get that effect. You get that sort of, when you think of what your favorite book is, you have a feeling that is just like, it's enraptured love. Like, you don't let go of that favorite book. You don't change your mind about that favorite book. No. In fact, what is your favorite book?
What is my favorite book? The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy.
Oh, tell me more. Why?
Well, I like Thomas Hardy because I like history for a start, but it takes place. Most of his stuff takes place in the 19th century, where there was a lot of change in in England with the post-industrial revolution, the railways and everything, and the effect of all that on. There's a backdrop of industry over agriculture and work in agriculture. But what I like most are. I like his love stories, but I like his character telling, because you can see yourself in some of those characters and you can see other people in some of those characters. It's just very, very strong, evocative. Mm-hmm. Some might say heavy, but I like it. Really good.
He went into some forbidden territory too.
Yes.
He did. And he also was very successful in his time. He isn't one of those authors that we sort of discovered later. He was writing novels and people were reading them and following him. I went to his house, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's there where you start to, I guess the next little part, you'd be heading to Cornwall. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's right. On the way to Cornwall, with Wessex, the sort of famed county of England where it all took place. So, in fact, I've got, you might even better see it up on my bookshelf.
Yes.
I've got it. I've got a Thomas Hardy poetry book that my mother bought me. It's a big, thick, I can't see it at the moment, but it's a big, thick book.
Nice.
And it's his poems, which you don't hear about as much, I don't think. But some of them are really good. There's one about a train where he's on a train journey. It's just that something clicks with it, But I guess you get that with other writers. I mean, when I was a child, I used to like the C.S. Lewis books, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Yes,
they were
same here.
Books. Yeah.
That transported me.
And the other one was, you may or may not have heard of it. It was a very English book by Captain W.E. Johns, Biggles. Biggles well, he was a fighter pilot in the war, and it's just stories for boys about what they got up to, and that was always they were a very good series of books to read. And what about yourself? What other writers? I mean, you mentioned the one that was parallel that your father recommended. I think with Hemingway. So it was a lady writer, was it?
I mentioned Louisa May Alcott, Little Women.
Yeah.
I grew up, I grew up with 3 younger sisters. So, but I was very much Joe in that whole configuration. I was the writer, you know.
Well, yeah,
And so that was a big one. But also just, I mean, you know, for a lot of women as little girls, Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls Wilder, I loved learning later in life that she was actually a newspaper columnist.
Oh, right.
And she also, that's how she made money for her family. Same thing with Louisa May Alcott. She often wrote simply to support her family and was successful. So, yeah, there's a really good book about Laura Ingalls Wilder. I'm not going to remember the name of it, even though it won the Pulitzer Prize. It's something about prairie fires. It's got prairie fires in the name of it. But it really goes into her later life after what she was writing about, her growing up on the prairie.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a nice little diversion away from some of the questions that I had prepared, but it's always good to be spontaneous, isn't it?
Yes.
What was the spark that made you decide to write Boundless, Carolyn?
Oh, yes. Pain. No, I knew I was living something. There's something about maybe being a writer that you are always sort of attuned to the twists and turns of plot in your own life. And I knew that something momentous was changing in me. And so I started really paying attention. And part of it was I think what drives a lot of writers into the new and original territory is what you don't know. It's the unknown. And I knew I was going into some pretty unknown territory because I was a single mother of twins. They were graduating and going to college out of state. And that was 2/3 of my family leaving at once. At the same time, so that's my core identity as a mother. At the same time, I was in journalism and the industry was just in a death spiral. And I didn't know, that just did not seem sustainable. So there's another identity, core identity. And so for the first time in my life, I was experiencing a colossal failure of the imagination as to what my life would be. I mean, I could sort of picture some things like, yeah, it'll be this house, but there's only going to be one person in it. But I just couldn't run the movie trailer beyond that. There was just nothing coming. So that I knew that I needed to pay. There's a point in Boundless where I am on the porch at night and the twins have gone back to their rooms. My son's playing Canon and D and the guitar, and my daughter's playing Vance Joy. What's the name of that song? I can't remember it right now. Vance Joy song. It's like one of those 140 beats a minute songs. Oh, right. Infectious. Yeah. Two contrasts. Canon and D is it's the one that brides walk up the aisle to. But that music is happening in my house. And I'm realizing I got to find my own music. And I realized it's going to hurt like hell, but I'm going to figure it out, that I'm all new territory.
And by music, you mean writing a book?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So just take notes, pay attention, take notes. Memoir is about the selection of events in your life. A lot of us do feel like we're living a story. Like my life could be a movie, people say. And I think that it's a wonderful thing to feel like that about your life. There's a piece of this is called narrative therapy. It's very effective in kind of pulling back all those pieces of your life and adding meaning to them. So, yeah, I knew I was just going to be on a journey with twists and turns, and I was going through tremendous change. All stories are about change. And at that moment, I just say, so just pay attention, just be present to it, see what happens.
And did you make notes? So you had this idea. Did you make notes as you were sort of traveling through?
I'm making those all the time.
What, mental notes or written notes?
Yeah, journaling. Yeah, just I pay attention to my life. Yes. I show up to it. Dolly Shapiro is a memoir. She's a memoirist and novelist, but she's mostly known as a memoirist, a multiple memoirist. And she has a craft book called Still Writing. And in it, she says, I know what I'm thinking and feeling because I write. In other words, we get down beneath the surface when we write, when we talk to the page, like it's the thing that will always receive you.
Yes.
You know, it's like your favorite. John O'Donoghue, the Irish poet, talks about like our toys when we're little,
Yes.
or our first pets, like dolls, pets. Those are sort of the first true confessional activities that we have. You tell your doll everything because you think your doll wants to receive everything. So your toys are beloved. And I feel like you tell your first pet or your imaginary friend everything. And I think that the next step is the page.
Yeah. I can see that. I mean, there's something I do sometimes is it's actually called morning pages. You're probably familiar with it. It takes half an hour or whatever it takes. And I tend to use a fountain pen. I've had a few problems with this pen recently. It doesn't seem to flow properly. But what I like is, and I think you were getting at it there, you can write something almost in stream of consciousness. Anything that comes to mind, like I can hear the cat coming in through the cat flap, the wind's howling outside, I can hear the first birds tweeting, that sort of thing. And you go off into all sorts of different places. And I suppose it's a bit like a bit of therapy, really, except you're not having to pay for it, just the ink in your pen. So I sometimes do that. I don't always have the time, but I do find that good.
Yeah, there's always something there. One of my mentors in my MFA program had a simple one, which is just wake up in the morning and write what's on my mind today.
Yeah.
But there's always something there to explore. And I don't do it every day.
No.
I'm busy like everybody else.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got to worry about the stock market. Got to worry about the war. These things grab me. But when I do, there's always something there to explore.
So what's the difference then between a memoir, because you sort of focus on a memoir, and Boundless is a memoir and, say, an autobiography?
Oh, that's a really good question. And a lot of memoirists think that what they're doing is an autobiography, but an autobiography is really your whole life. And a memoir is really, it's about the selection of events to make a certain kind of meaning about a sliver of your life. And it may touch on sort of the narrative arc of your life in terms of producing that shape that creates that meaning. There are a lot of flashbacks in Boundless where I fill in the rest of the picture. It takes place from March 2017 to October 2017. But it is the story that there's a whole life lived beneath that. The difference then in memoir is that it's usually time-bound in some way, and that it is not just a recitation. I call it the parade of events, and that's a trap that memoir writers fall into, is that they think they need to present the parade of events. The parade of events don't have that much meaning. What makes a memoir have meaning is the reflection of the person who is remembering the life. That's what makes a memoir potent.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Obviously, the book with yourself, it helped you through a transitionary period in life, and men and women, we all go through transitionary parts of our lives. It's part of, as you mentioned earlier on, the story that we're part of. What do you think, for those people that don't have I wouldn't say the ability, but don't write, not everybody writes a book, not everybody writes a memoir. What can they learn from the book about transitionary times in their lives?
I think it's about emotional agility, just learning that you always have the capacity to change and to go into the unknown. And at a certain point in life, I think we get kind of stuck in the same way of thinking, which would, the opposite of emotional agility would be emotional rigidity. And emotional rigidity is when this happens, this always follows.
So it calcifies, sort of thing.
Calcifies, yes. That's a really good word to use for it, yes. And one of the pieces I've got that came out in AARP magazine, AARP magazine, was about just how to get some emotional agility. Think like a 20-something. And in Boundless, one of the things I do is I actually am trying to become someone new. And I look around and I'm living with two people who are becoming someone new. They're making the biggest transition, I think, of our lives from childhood to adulthood. And they're in the middle of telling the story of their becoming. They're writing college essays, and I'm helping them tweak them a little bit and send them off. And they're telling a little narrative about their lives ahead of actually living them. But I was in this experiment with becoming, and that has just only continued as the twins have eased into their 20s. They're 26 now. And some of that is experimentation. When you get to a certain point, as you say, calcified, you don't let yourself experiment with that spiritedness that you have when you're young. And because when you're young, you go, I'm going to bounce back. Maybe at the time you go like, I'm never going to recover from losing that person I loved. That's what you think. But then you do. You try things, you bounce back. And when you have a whole collection of bounce back experience, you have a resilience journey that you can tap into. And so I learned that I could recreate the container of my life. I could do it, and it could be fun. It could be an exciting project.
It must have been great to while you were writing it, to actually understand what was happening to you. And as you say, you were able to take risks, I guess, try certain things out like you do when you're younger. You bounce back, you learn from it, you loop backwards, and you start again. So that must have been almost like it almost sounds like it was a bit of the whole writing process at that time was almost like a scientific experiment.
Yeah, the study of myself. But I do say that when a memoir writer is like, the self is the highway to story, and it really opens up all kinds of things. That's why that whole genre, I think, has just exploded, and it's borne fruit in many different subforms, and it's because we really don't get a picture of the interior life of a person except through it. Like the thing about novels and memoirs is the interior life of either a fictional character or a true, real, living character.
Yes.
And you don't get that even in movies. You sense it, I think, with a good actor. But novels and memoirs are where the interiority is. So that's why I think that I try to embolden memoir writers as a book coach and let them know that, you are being vulnerable. You're putting your interior life on the page, and some of it's not pretty, but you are helping somebody who cannot maybe speak about the pain or transformation they're going through, because you're putting it out there and you're showing that you had the resilience to get through it, even in your darkest parts of the night.
And I guess, memoir isn't always about events and situations in life that are particularly difficult.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a trauma or a personal transition. I think we think of a lot of memoirs as trauma memoirs. But I think it also is just, again, the self is the highway to story. I probably learned that way before I started writing memoir. I probably learned that as a journalist. There's something about just you show up and you bear witness to events that changes those events because you're close to the events. Again, people can't go where you go. If you think about a foreign correspondent in a war, people can't go and know what it's like on the front lines of the war, but the journalist can take you places that you wouldn't ever get to go. They can take you into the situation room where the people are deciding what the war will be, because they will interview every person who was in that room and all their aides, but they could take you into those places. So I feel like that is another form of memoir. It's an immersion memoir sometimes, because sometimes the journalist is embedded with the troops or embedded on the scientific mission to Antarctica, and just they're the person who has the time to take notes, while the other people are getting samples from the glaciers in Antarctica and putting them under a microscope. But the journalist is talking to everybody about, so what's it like to be in Antarctica?
Yes. What type of journalism did you get involved with, Carolyn?
Well, weirdly, I started with sports.
Yeah.
But what I loved about that was just the idea of excellence, personal excellence and performance, and what it takes to be excellent at something. I very quickly started getting interested in environmental journalism, and in at that same time, there was a report in the United States about how our education system was failing and a crisis in education. So I became very interested in that and covered an education beat, an environmental beat for a number of years.
It must have been very interesting on the sports side, seeing the achievers, and you must have learned quite a lot about what made them tick and made them perform well. What did you take away from that?
Well, I took that. I also am the daughter of a woman who was a trained classical pianist. And so discipline, practice. And I think that, that was happening every day in my house. My mom would do all the things that a homemaker does. Iron all of our clothes and get us all off to our school and everything. And she would have piano students, and she would practice like she needed to play the Moonlight Sonata in front of a room, and with that kind of discipline. So there was something about discipline and practice that was happening all around me all the time in my house. And then I saw that same thing when I started talking to different athletes of all kinds, tennis, soccer, basketball, you name it. I even interviewed the fourth string quarterback for the college university. It was my first assignment. We'll give that to the new one. We'll ask her to interview the fourth string quarterback. I found him interesting because he had done things. He had been excellent on his high school team, and he had gotten there. So it's practice, discipline.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the writing itself, because obviously you coach people, but I'd like to talk about writers and writing. And I suppose that's a good segue into what we were discussing there with people who practice a lot. And I guess it's the same for writing, isn't it? The more you practice, the more disciplined you are, the more successful you are, would you say? I don't mean successful in terms of earning loads of money, although that's nice. I mean in terms of actually the creative aspects of writing something that is interesting for somebody. Am I right there?
You are right. I often say that everything I ever did at Spalding is gold. Spalding is my MFA in writing degree. That's where I went. It's actually called the Naslin Mann School of Writing now, named after the two women who founded it. And it's in Louisville, Kentucky. It also had a study abroad component or an international residency component. So I did all of those each year. That's how I ended up at Thomas Hardy's house. Our first residency was in the UK. So we did a lot in London, and then we went out to Wessex, Thomas Hardy's house, and then we ended up in Bath, did a lot of Jane Austen there.
I was going to say, did you go to Jane Austen's house in Hampshire?
Yes, we did. And we actually went to Stratford-upon-Avon and saw a Shakespearean play there, the Royal Shakespeare Company. We saw The Merchant of Venice, and I ended up writing a piece about The Merchant of Venice that appeared in the Tampa Review. It's called, what's it called? I can't remember the name of what it's called. It's slipping my mind right at the moment, but it is inspired by seeing that play in Stratford-upon-Avon. And it was in Tampa Review in 2011. I'll remember the name later, and maybe we can get that in the show notes.
Yeah,
but but I say everything that I ever did there was gold, and it's because of that discipline. I start writing like, this is a fascinating play. I don't know why I'm writing it. Just that I want to describe what the actors look like on that stage for that play, which is so timeless.
Yes.
And it's called Pound of Flesh.
Pound of Flesh, right.
That's
We'll put that in the show notes. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Of course it's called Pound of Flesh. But I start writing it, and then it leads to something else, which it leads from the streets of Venice to the streets of my hometown. And it starts to merge with my childhood life. And it's really about the the sorrow and the hurt that comes from giving your life spirit to something and not prospering,
Right. Yeah.
which is the cost is the pound of flesh. You give your life spirit to something. I wrote that at the time that it was when the whole financial crisis of 2008 was brewing.
Yes.
It wouldn't have. It was going to be happening in September of that year, even though this was like June, July of that year.
Oh, yeah.
The seeds were there of the mistakes that people were making on Wall Street.
The subprime housing and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the discipline there is to stay with it and go, why am I exploring this? And it became something else. It really became something that I had always wanted to write a story about, because it became that story of my childhood, and my father is taking me to buy, I call it the lemon meringue car, because it was a beautiful yellow. Picture those beautiful cars from the 60s that had the chrome fins and everything. It was that kind of car, and symbolic of prosperity. Like, I think you've made it in life if you're driving a lemon meringue car.
Yes.
But it allowed
the American dream.
Yeah. I suppose. Yeah. Well, I think the American dream is territory, for me. It's very much territory for me. And I think you're asking, though, about that discipline. And the goal is realizing that I could do this small thing and it can become something. And then all of a sudden it has become something. And so I can do this next thing. And so Boundless actually has its origin in working in that program and writing a little essay. And that little essay called Resurrection got published in Fourth Genre, which is a creative nonfiction journal. It's one of the best ones in the United States. And it got published there. And I thought, oh, I'm done. And then I thought, no, it's calling me. It's still calling.
Okay, so it started off at Boundless, started off as an essay, and you just sort of built it up from there. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? You go back. I'm not talking about memoirs, but you go back to Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. When they published their books, they certainly Dickens, they were published in newspapers or journals over a period of time, weren't they? Rather than one great book that came out. And I just wonder whether that almost enforced discipline. Oh, I better get another one out next week because they're waiting for the next installment. Almost sort of helps with that discipline. What do you think?
I think so too, yeah. And I think I learned that as a journalist, of just the discipline of, like, I tend to be a perfectionist. I am the daughter of a classical pianist who is a perfectionist. And then the wonderful thing about journalism is it gives you a whole other kind of discipline of just, this is what the column is for the week, and I think it gave me the way to look at all of that. Maybe you're producing little somethings every week. And it gave me the ability to look and see how it could add up to something more together. I think that must have been what Charles Dickens was seeing, is that I think I could make a sweeping novel of this.
And I suppose, with journalism, you have deadlines. So you're forced to sort of, although you would want to be 100% right, you had to finish at 95%, but it was great anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to go, what do we know, what do we don't know? And what we don't know, we can't put in yet.
I was listening to an interview with a musician. I can't remember who it was, but he said something which somebody else had said some time ago, which was a lot of successful artists, the first thing they do when they have lots of money is to go and build their own recording studio in their house, thinking to themselves that I can produce great music whenever I want to. But inevitably lead not to the very best music they've ever made, because the fact they had to go somewhere different out of the house with costs involved where they had to get it done in a certain period of time almost forced them to use that creativity to a better effect. I wonder if it's similar. I
think it's grit. I think there's something about that contrast. There's something that you're pushing against. There's this sense of, like, they're not really going to let me do this. But I have to push a little bit more. I have to get myself to that other studio. I have to get the studio time.
Yeah.
So I think it's that grit that actually makes the art more powerful.
Yes. Right. So I'd like to talk about writing. We probably have got some listeners on who perhaps have thought about writing a book. It may not be a memoir. It could be a novel, or it could even be nonfiction. And I think probably when you speak to most people, many people have said that, oh, I think I've got a novel in me. What would you say to any listeners that are thinking of writing specifically a memoir? What advice would you give them initially, Carolyn?
I think that start really looking at memoir as a reflection upon events that gives them meaning. And then select those events to recreate that meaning for someone else. That would probably be the first place to look. I also think that memoir demands you be vulnerable. So do what you have to do to be vulnerable. Do what you have to do to support yourself to be vulnerable. And I think that's where a coach comes in. As a coach can help you be bolder, but I also say my 16 superpowers of memoir writers on my Substack, get a therapist. So there's that. For memoir, I would say that I find that time and time again, I find the tiniest way in that tells the whole story. Like I said, I had an essay first, and then I thought, oh, I'm done, and then it turns out it's more. And find the tiniest way in, the tiniest scene, the tiniest object. Maybe I'm just, this is fresh in my mind, but I'm reading Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, Irish writer, and he starts with the tiniest moment, whereas there's a knocking. And Eilish, the main character, it's set in a dystopian Ireland where it's an authoritarian regime, etc.
Yeah.
And there's a knocking, and then there's sort of this glass that she can't quite see through. And that's the moment that shows the journey she's about to go on.
And so if we've got anybody who is looking for a coach, I assume you can offer those services and you can do it online.
Right. Yes. My website, which is carolynflynn.com, has a work with me page, shows all those packages that can get you the right fit. I have free discovery calls so people can talk to me and we can figure out what the right fit, what you need now. And I do one-on-one work over Zoom to people on every continent but Antarctica so far. So I work with all time zones. I am often very time zone confused, or at least I know that I could be potentially time zone confused. So I'm always triple checking on the time zone. But yeah, we work wherever you are. I meet you wherever you are in terms of just literally where you are on Zoom and what time zone you're in, but also just where you are on the journey. Boundless is an empty nest memoir, and one of the things I discovered is that this, and I had this intuition that it was true, but I had to live it to truly discover it. But I think this is a new frontier in human development now. I think that we are not quite seeing how much we can change to become someone new. And I would say it's probably post 50, and it doesn't have to be spurred by the emptiness. You don't even have to have had children. You just have to have been on the planet long enough to basically, I call it the second adulthood. So we have a first adulthood, and it's marked by all these coming of age moments. But we don't have a second adulthood that's really marked with that. And that's a period of life when there does tend to be a lot of grief coming your way. And what I mean by that is it's probably at first it's your aging parents. So you lose a parent, you lose another parent, suddenly you're an orphan. You have to grapple with what that means to be in the world without your parents in it anymore. Kind of at midlife, you also are experiencing career changes. And I don't think it's just the march to retirement. I think that there are questions we start asking ourselves, like, what am I here for? What's my
Yeah.
contribution? What is my legacy? Isn't there something more that I can give before I move on to the next passage of life? And you start asking yourself harder questions. I, I'm troubled when I see people just sort of like winding it down to retirement and rather than ramping it up and asking new questions
Absolutely.
about what's beyond.
Yeah.
I don't ever consider myself retiring. I consider
No.
myself just taking the next big leap,
Yes.
and it is, so you're starting to ask questions about what's the reason I'm here?
Yeah.
What's the reason I have this name, this body, this mind, this network around me of family and friends, and these particular talents? So what do I do with it?
Yeah. I don't like the word retirement. It comes from the French retard, which means to back off and fade into the distance. I prefer renaissance because I think it's that time in your life when you can do things that you perhaps thought about, like write a book, learn a musical instrument, get a new network of friends.
It's a renaissance. I actually think that, I think that our culture looks at older people and thinks, oh, well, they're winding down. They're sort of fading out and disappearing. And literally we do, our appearance starts to fade a little. That's one of the griefs, but I think it's because there's so much more that can come forth through you than for people to see you because you have a certain look to you.
Yes. Yeah.
When you're in your 20s, you're vibrant, and that's what people see. But when you're older, that's less and less important.
Yes, it's very easy to become invisible, isn't it?
It's very easy to become, and that is what I grapple with. I'm at the cusp of that. I'm going like, oh, do I have to be invisible now? Am I supposed to be invisible?
No, definitely not.
So one thing I say to people about this time of life is recognize that you actually have freedom and wisdom now.
Yeah.
Like when you were 17, you didn't quite have the wisdom, right? And you thought you had the freedom. I think the freedom is an illusion because there's so much pressure to create the container of your life, to choose a viable career and find a way to make money.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot of freedom. That's sort of constraining you to a certain point. And then at some point that lets up. You've made your money. You've established yourself in life. So you have a container for your life. And you have more freedom than you will ever imagine, coupled with the wisdom to know how to try things, create little experiments, notice what you enjoy, remember who you were before you embarked on your first adulthood. So there's a little passage in Boundless where lots of things have happened. I don't do any of this gracefully, by the way. That's why it's a tragicomic memoir. I end up thinking I'm leaving journalism, but then all of a sudden the siren call and I get called into a job that seems like it could be the capstone. So I move all the way across the country, but I end up moving all the way across the country and back in one summer. So I'm back. I'm in Albuquerque. It didn't work out. I could decide to have my tail between my legs, but I've decided that it's going to be Albuquerque 2.0. It's going to be new. I'm going to see the whole place that I lived in for a quarter of a century, and the place where I raised my kids. I'm going to see it as though I've never seen it before. But what I'm doing is very reluctantly emptying all the boxes, and a friend has come to give me moral support for this arduous task. And we open a box, and it has 2 little glasses of Waterford crystal that I bought in Ireland when I was 21 and I was on study abroad. And it was a moment captured in time before I became a wife. I was engaged, but I had not yet become a wife. I had one more semester of school, so I hadn't really got that stump of approval to become a journalist. So I had not become a wife or journalist or eventually mother. I sort of held that. And I realized that was the freedom to become. I chose what to become then, but I can choose something else now. So that's what made me realize that this whole idea of being on the cusp of a second adulthood.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you, Carolyn. I'm looking forward to reading the book. It's got a great cover, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the designer did a great job.
We'll put everything on the show notes.
Oh, good.
You'll link to the website and the book so that people can read it. So thank you ever so much for coming on the show, Carolyn.
Well, thank you for having me.